All right. I think people will continue to kind of trickle in as we get started here at the lunch hour, probably wrapping up their virtual meetings that end at noon. But let's jump in today and get things kicked off. We are recording, so if you missed the first couple minutes, maybe catch it up afterwards. But I want to say good welcome to everyone. Good afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us today for our Stronger Together Roundtable discussion. I'm Ronecca Norvell. I'm the CEO of Financial Beginnings, and we are a nonprofit dedicated to advancing financial education and empowerment for individuals, families, and communities across the country. I want to extend a special thank you to our friends from Ferguson Wellman Capital Management and Unitas Community Credit Union for sponsoring our Financial Literacy Month activities. And we're really excited to host this conversation as part of our Financial Literacy Month, a time to reflect, share, and most importantly, take action. We know that financial education isn't just nice to have. It's a critical tool for building stability, resilience, opportunity, and hope. And in a time of economic uncertainty, the need has never been more urgent. So our goal today is to explore the impact we can make together, because we know that if we work together, we can get more done, and there's plenty of work to do. Together, we will look at what the data is telling us, what real partnerships can look like between nonprofits and the financial sector, how we can move the needle together, and why, at the end of the day, this work matters so deeply to people in our communities. We're really grateful to have such a great group of panelists and also people with us on the call today. So thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to introduce our wonderful panelists that we have together with us today, both incredible leaders, really helping to move the needle in unique ways. So we have Dr. Billy Hensley. He is president and CEO of the National Endowment for Financial Education, or NEFI. A national leader in redefining financial education, Dr. Hensley has expanded NEFI's research footprint, elevated the importance of universal K-12 financial education, and shaped the national dialogue around equity and effectiveness in the field. He also serves on several influential boards, including Jumpstart and the CNBC Global Financial Wellness Advisory Board. And we also have Lindsay Torrico. She is Senior Vice President of Bank Community Engagement at the American Bankers Association and Executive Director at the ABA Foundation. Lindsay leads national efforts to drive financial empowerment, inclusion, and community resilience through banking partnerships. And with a background in public policy and a decade of work at United Way Worldwide, she brings deep experience in cross-sector collaboration and a passion for expanding economic opportunity. There will be a little bit of time at the end for questions, and you can put those in the chat as we go along, and I will kind of bring those back up at the end for our panelists to answer. But let's start here with the first question for both of you. We'll start with Lindsay. Why is now such a critical moment for financial education?
Well, thank you. And let me say thank you to First Beginnings for hosting this roundtable. It's an honor to join Billy for this conversation. And I'll note that it's great that we're having this conversation at the end of National Financial Literacy Month, because it's a reminder to all of us that this work is important, not just this month, but all year round. So to your question about why this is such a critical moment, it's no secret, as you mentioned, Ronecca, that we are living in challenging economic times. Our communities are hurting, and the stakes are really high. What we're seeing is, one, people want financial literacy. We just released data earlier this month that finds that 72% of people believe they would be better off financially if they had learned the basics of personal finance at an earlier age. And two, people need it. We all know that most people in this country are one unexpected expense from financial hardship. And the data from Financial Health Network and others find that there is a distinct difference between people that have financial literacy background and those that don't. And I think the other reason is that there's clear bipartisan cross-sector support for this. We know that financial literacy is an important issue in terms of building financial capability and stability. The economy was one of the most important indicators and motivators in the most recent presidential election. And we just recently partnered with Department of Treasury last week on a partnership around Teach Children to Save, which is our national effort to engage bankers in financial literacy. So there's cross-sector support, there's momentum across industries and governments to support this, and we need to leverage that momentum towards real positive change. So again, people want it, people need it, and there's an appetite to get it done.
Great. Thank you, Lindsay. Billy, anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, the momentum is really good right now. For a lot of reasons, some of them not great, really. But between 83 and 88% of Americans, sort of depending on when you ask them and how you ask the question, believe that every young person should have to take a personal finance course, at least a semester or a year long, to graduate. And building off Lindsay's statistic, we asked, do you wish someone had made you take this class? And 82% of people said, yes, I wish someone had made me take the class. So they're reflecting on the benefit and how that could have really served them in their life at various stages, including the present. Our financial landscape in terms of being the CFO of your life is as complicated now as it has been in history. To have to craft and create your own financial plan for your retirement based on your own decisions and your own contributions, and as well as the complex nature of managing your financial life with all of the things that are going on related to inflation, related to lack of economic mobility for certain groups. And people are understanding the power and agency of knowledge. There's a lot of other things that have to happen before that knowledge can really truly work. But I think having this momentum with seeing the power of what this can do in individual lives and in communities and in regions and whole economies is not something that is lost on the average consumer. People want this information and they're asking for it at a very fundamental level. People are going to schools and saying, on behalf of their children or even on behalf of themselves, student advocates are very powerful. They are asking for something. Why is this being withheld? Why are we not being taught this information? We have to have this information to fully participate in a healthy way in the economy. And so all of those things are contributing to the momentum. Some of that's positive, some of it is negative, but either way, it amplifies the need for the work that you are doing.
Thank you. And Billy, I think the next question is really for you as the, leader of an organization that does so much impactful research for our field, that really helps us know, where the gaps are, what people need, and then how to activate that as our, Financial Beginnings does as a frontline organization. So tell me, what does the latest data say about where financial literacy is improving and where it's falling short?
I'll throw a few statistics at you because I can't help myself. But in general, what we have found, especially over the last 10 to 12 years, is as we've understood how to strengthen the intervention, meaning the class or the workshops, what have you, the outcomes are stronger. And so when you're applying principles of education, human development and learning, curriculum design, age-specific lessons. As we've done a better job of that as an industry, what we have found is that the last few years of research on financial education have shown that we're 3 to 5 times more effective than several years ago when the data were weaker and the interventions weren't prescribed as clearly as it's emerging now. Financial education that's really thoughtfully designed, like a graduation requirement, for example, that's tied to standards. It leads to lasting improvements, measurable long-term improvements in budgeting, saving, credit, and in particular, confidence. That's a squishy word, but when you are more confident in your ability to sort through the noise, to ask for help when you need help and know where your limits are. One of the other things that's really fascinating about the research is that financial education is actually cost effective. It's relatively inexpensive when you compare it to other kinds of interventions. And, it's as impactful as things like literacy or anti-smoking campaigns and what that looks like sort of tied to that. We know that really well-designed financial education classes lead to better borrowing in college, meaning you borrow less, and you borrow more appropriately, like subsidized loans or federally backed loans versus private loans. You graduate from college with lower revolving debt. You have fewer delinquencies. Your credit scores are higher, after about 5 years, upwards of 40 points compared to people who did not have financial education classes. And, that translates into lower cost borrowing. It incorporates into so many things that are very powerful at any stage of life, but in particular, when you're younger and you're getting started, because you have more liquidity to do other things like save for retirement. These things compound over time. And so there's lots of these sort of statistics that are helpful. But, financial education, your class that you teach is not necessarily sort of a one size fits all approach. The effectiveness of financial education really depends on the context. That's why we invest in understanding what works for whom and in what settings and under what conditions. We have projects with rural Appalachian colleges right now looking at first generation students, lower income students, what's working for them versus what maybe is working in the Colorado Community College system, which is another partnership we have, where working adults are trying to make time to sort of learn this as they're going from job to class to picking up kids to homework to dinner and all the things in between. And so we're trying to sort of understand the different ways to sort of adapt financial education interventions to do that. And we've also grown a lot in our understanding that foundational factors like culture, socioeconomic background, family norms, geography, play a huge role in how well FinEd will and won't work depending on what's going on around you. Knowledge and access is wonderful, but if you have weaker economic foundational factors in your life, then you've got to sort of overcome some of those things as well before the full benefit of FinEd takes place. So we've come a long way, and we're continuing to make strides in learning how to make FinEd work for all. Because, we have this saying at NEFI, I don't want it to be as trite as maybe it sounds on paper, but if FinEd doesn't work for everyone, it just doesn't work. And so our goal is to try to figure out how to make it work for everyone. How do we get those last few percentage of people who don't think it should be required to see the value in that and move forward? And a lot of times that has to do with cultural representation in the curriculum and relatable lesson plans and some of the trauma that we bring into the classroom that's tied to our financial past, and how do we overcome that so that we can make the topic relevant and a bit demystified for people from all backgrounds and all learners. So
Yeah, thanks, Billy. I think, everyone has a story in their history where they've made a choice that they look back on about their finances and maybe they would have done it differently. And it is really
Sure.
important that we're meeting our learners where they're at and being flexible and adapting to those specific needs that they have. I really appreciate that. That's something that we really take to heart at Financial Beginnings. I think the next question is about data points that have surprised you. So I'm interested, Lindsay, to start with you, to ask you what data points have surprised you or shifted your thinking recently as you think about financial education.
I wouldn't say it's surprising, but I'll mention a data point that underscores the challenge that Billy spoke to. We saw some recent data from FINRA that while there are 27 states that implement financial literacy requirements for high school, only 10 of those states have fully implemented youth financial literacy. So there are still 17 states that are in progress. And I think, it to me, it shows that there is a critical role for bankers to play in helping to support the implementation of financial education in classrooms. Many states are determining right now how to implement it and how to incorporate in their curriculum. And teachers aren't necessarily the experts on how to teach financial literacy. And so this is an opportunity where we're really encouraging banks to be at the table at these conversations at the state and local level. What does implementation look like? How are you informing that curriculum and making sure that it's effective, that it's engaging, that you are highlighting what are the greatest needs right now? Because we believe that banks can help enhance that curriculum, but it does take those partnerships on the ground to make that happen. And I think there's a huge opportunity right now for all of us to support teachers in the classroom in implementing this and making sure it's really meeting students where they are. So that's a data point that I think is really troubling, but I think there's potential for it to be a moment for more collaboration and more effective curriculum to help students be more financially sound.
Yeah, thank you, Lindsay. I know that there is implementation issues across the nation around the financial literacy bills. And also, at Financial Beginnings, we start our curriculum with kids in kindergarten, and most of these bills are just a high school graduation requirement. And we know that financial education is a lifelong journey, and we really believe in an early and often kind of mentality. I've heard a lot about the 90 hours of financial education goal before high school. And so we love being able to help play that role and really help build that up. So kids come into high school at least knowing vocabulary and some more simple concepts, needs versus wants, all those kinds of things are so important to build early. What about you, Billy? What's been surprising to you?
That without a graduation requirement, how unevenly this is happening. Because only 5% of low-income schools require this without being told they have to do it. And schools with majority Black or Hispanic student populations are half as likely to even offer this as a course. And higher income are 3 times as likely in general, higher income schools, to offer this course. So, we're perpetuating an unevenness and a lack of access without trying to standardize this access, meaning a graduation requirement. Now, that's only one step of many, to your point that you've both made. It comes into the implementation, it comes into all of these things. But I think, for me, until we're at 50 states fully implemented and in the classroom, you're going to have lots of stories about low-income schools, low-income communities that are not providing this essential cornerstone life skill. And it may or may not be happening in the home. It may not be happening in other ways, after school clubs, churches, activities, things like that. but until it is fully implemented with high quality and rigor, there's we're not going to be able to help shift a generation because you don't want to perpetuate that. And that to me is a statistic that we should all memorize because that is still, for me, it's a rallying cry for making sure that everyone has this. And I will say, in terms of this lifelong pursuit that you said, I thought about this the other day. If I had taken, I didn't, if I had taken a personal finance class in high school to graduate, that would have just been the beginning because I turned 16 in 1991. The products, the way we do credit scores, the way we purchase, the way we interact with commerce in general is so different that if I had thought I'm done and never decided to learn again, I would have been no better off than had not taken the class. So this point about this being a lifelong pursuit, this being an on-ramp, this giving you the confidence to approach the rest of your life with these questions is a really good point. And that's not a true statistic. I'm an N of one. I'm a case study. But for me, I'm glad that I've had access to this information throughout my life, not just that one time.
Yeah, definitely. Well, let's turn to talking about how we actually do this work and the partnerships that we build to make sure that it happens and happens well. So Billy, we'll start with you. Tell me about some partnerships that you've seen that have been really successful around financial education, and what do you draw from that tells us what made that work?
Um, I have the great fortune of having been around this work for 15 years now. And I've seen a lot of good examples. I mean, when I first came into NEFI, we were working on this project of trying to rethink teacher professional development. And what made that work so beautifully is, and it's a neat thing about this industry in general, is that most of the time we leave our egos at the door and we come in looking at how do we bring the special thing we do to the table to create this sort of more collective way of designing a project like that teacher professional development project that was in 5 different states, and we did it a little bit different in each state. It leaving your ego at the door, but bringing in where you're confident in what you do well. NEFI knows what it does well. The ABA Foundation knows what it does well. And coming in with that and sort of listening to each other. That's the second component. I think that these elements of listening and hearing each other. Listen, like for us, we have to listen to people who are on the ground doing this work because we don't provide direct service to learners. So we have to trust our friends that are doing this work on the field. And then we have to sort of be the stewards of translating what we're hearing from data and what does that mean for practice. And you have to say to us, that's never going to work, and this is why, and maybe we ask better questions. One of the things that's real time for us is, I mentioned it earlier, this project with the Appalachian College Association. And, all of those schools that are in this cohort have a lot of similarities and a lot of differences. And we designed that project with enough flexibility that people could manage the local nuance of what's needed. They may have a more community facing project versus sort of an internal facing project. But trusting local people who are experts in their population, not coming in with, it's one of the philosophies we have at NEFI as a funder. We don't think we have the answer just because we have the money. I think that is such, a waste of energy. We're coming to you because you're the expert, but being willing to listen, being willing to let the data tell you what they tell you, and then asking better questions. I think partnerships that are willing to ask better questions, that are willing to have a mindset of evaluation, not to prove something, but to improve something, really strengthens the work. And not trying to do it on your own. You know, there's too few of us in this industry that have too big of a problem to think that we're solely going to be able to answer the question without listening and without sort of that collaborative nature. But it all starts with leaving your ego at the door.
Yeah, what about you, Lindsay? What kind of successful partnerships have you seen? You've been in nonprofit and now you're in the banking space. So tell me what you've seen.
Yeah, I love this question because it's going from theoretical to practical on the ground. And, one of the things that has been really remarkable is to see a partnership with the Association of Military Banks of America, also known as AMBA, and their partnership with the VA on a veterans benefits banking program. This is a program that was created in 2019 to solve a specific issue. And the issue was that veterans were using prepaid cards or debit cards to access their VA benefits. And they were being susceptible to fraud and scams. They were losing cards. And so the VA reached out to this nonprofit, AMBA, to help find a solution. And the solution was they brought financial institutions to the table to provide free or low-cost bank accounts for veterans and military families so they could access their VA benefits. And this has been really groundbreaking. And what's been remarkable is that it hasn't just been this effort to get them banked, but they're also layering financial education. So in the last 2 years, we have joined this effort. And in addition to getting them banked, we're also helping to provide one free financial counseling session to every veteran that signs up. And they also get access to a hub of financial tools and resources. So really, I think what's been powerful is we have clear goals with the fact that over 400,000 veterans have now been banked through this program. We have clear roles and responsibilities. The VA, AMBA, ABA Foundation playing our role as kind of convener of banks. And then we also are using the data to guide our decision making for this program. We have access to data. Each of the veterans has access to essentially a questionnaire where they can say what are their biggest financial challenges, and we're using that data to understand what are their biggest barriers, what are their needs, what interventions are necessary, do they need additional counseling, to determine the next steps in the program. So it's really been a huge lift, but it has, each of us has contributed to this effort, and it's been really meaningful to see ultimately the impact that we're all having together.
That's great. I love hearing the way that those partnerships, move from theoretical to really making that impact for people and people's lives. At Financial Beginnings, we work in partnerships almost exclusively. And so I love hearing these stories of the way partnerships can really move the needle for people. So now, continuing down our questions here about really what's the business case for financial literacy? In today's climate, there's so much going on. And wondering, as you guys think about business case for corporate partners, for really all kinds of different organizations that we have in our economy, how can professionals and how can financial professionals really make the case in their organization and connect that to trust and customer retention and long-term financial health, not only for everybody in our society who benefits from financial education, but also for the business. Lindsay, let's start with you on that one.
Yeah, I've been in this role for about 2.5 years, and what was clear to me coming into this is that we need a stronger case, a bit stronger business case for this work. Bankers are committed to doing financial literacy because it is the right thing to do and it is aligned with their CRA goals. But to really move this forward, we as financial literacy advocates and practitioners need to be able to articulate how it impacts their bottom line. And that's really where we see banks step up, in a much more essential way is when they understand this means more customers, this means more loyal customers, this leads to greater reputational benefits, more partnership opportunities, better community impact. So making that case is really critical. And one of the things that we've been working on is a guide for nonprofit organizations on how they can make that case with their financial institutions. This is a guide that we're going to be releasing in July. And it's really catered to nonprofits on how do you build partnership with banks and how do you help articulate that case for why this work is important, both for the bank and for the community, and it provides that win-win proposition. So we are trying to provide that kind of practical guidance to equip everyone to make that case outside of the bank, but also so that the bank leaders internally can make that same case with their own executives and shareholders. And yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that we as a field need to do better of. I think a lot about the childcare field, and I used to work in childcare advocacy, and the business case was so clear in childcare advocacy. For every $1 you put into childcare, you get $7 return. There are benefits to the community. There are benefits for the country as a whole. And so we as an industry need to make sure that we are investing in, and that's where Billy and others come in the right research, so that we can make that case effectively as a movement.
All right, Billy, anything you want to fill in on what the research is telling us, or different ways we can be making business case for financial literacy?
We have a long way to go in the research on this. It's people are just starting to ask some of these questions, and I think when we can have empirical data, or even, at the very least, opinion polling data on this, I think we can start to make some headwind in terms of advocacy and awareness. But I am encouraged because I was at an event a couple of weeks ago, I guess probably a month ago now, talking about retirement readiness. And it was a small group, a couple of hundred people, and most of the speakers were members of Congress, a lot of them, and employers and union representatives. In every single panel, every single speaker talked about the importance of financial education, financial literacy, financial wellness programming. And so it's mainstream, if you will, or it's getting there in terms of what this looks like, and that more and more people are talking about it. Jamie Dimon, the president of Chase, said from the stage at this event that they are doing financial education type initiatives with their employees, their frontline employees or entry-level employees. And so hearing people like that, I think you get a few key thought leaders that start saying it, maybe more and more will follow suit. I think you need better data to tell the story, but I think that the momentum that's happening is encouraging. I will also say that unions in particular have been doing some of this work for many years, and I think we could learn from them and how they've provided financial education, financial literacy programming for their members. Some of the apprentice type positions, things like elevator repair and people who work in port jobs and so forth. There are some examples out there of what it looks like to sort of mesh financial wellness training and financial wellness programming with career training. It's not scaled up enough that it's, we just pull it off the shelf and sort of know what to do. But those are some good places to start if you're looking for ideas. And in particular, a lot of the unions around like firefighters, police officers, and so forth have been doing some of this work, depending on the region and where you are. So there's some good examples to look to, but I think organizations like mine need to sort of step up and try to get more data out there.
Thanks, Billy. Yeah, we would love to talk more about that and what that could look like.
Yeah. If anybody's got an idea of a good opinion poll and how we should ask some of that, maybe I'll take it to my research team and we can budget for it next year.
All right. Lindsay, I think we know what our next conversation is.
I'll look for Billy, yeah.
Yeah, be careful what you ask for, Billy. You will be getting requests from me.
Go for it.
Well, I'm curious too, you guys have both shared so much about your strong background in this work. And like we said, there still is so much more to be done. And so I'm wondering what keeps you personally invested in this work of financial education, especially on those days or during those times where it seems hard. Billy, we'll start with you.
On the days that it seems hard, or is hard, think of the people that you're doing this work for. And if you step away, what the cost is. The economists talk about opportunity cost. You do this thing, and then does that mean you let go of these other things? Or you spend on this, there's no money for that, so to speak. Think about that. Now, I'm not talking about from an unhealthy place of not caring for yourself, but in a way of like, I have those people in my life that I do this for, literally those people who I think about. And then all those little faces you see when you speak at an event, those young people, um, you know, sometimes you need to think about your own journey and what you wish someone had said and done and advocated for you. That helps encourage me during sort of the challenging times. But what's kept me around for this long is this community is a really wonderful community of people. I have never picked up the phone um, and called someone or sent a note or saw someone at a conference where I maybe needed encouragement or needed advice or counsel or just needed to laugh, over coffee, that I didn't receive that. This is a very giving, thoughtful community, and I look forward to seeing all of you when I'm traveling, because we're in it together, and that is so powerful. I'm a very extroverted, touchy-feely, type. And those relationships sustain me in the work, knowing that others are doing the work on the ground, and figuring out ways to support them. All of that like keeps me excited, but a new research project that gives stronger data, that makes the case firmer, all of that like is good for me. So that's why we keep, doing that work, not just because I want to do it, our board wants to do it too, but all of that is so encouraging for me. And I think making time for reflection on that, making time to be in the room where teachers are learning and the light bulbs are coming on, or in a classroom, making time for that vivid, real experience of seeing the work come together is a powerful thing. And it's harder now because we do so many things on screen and video. We don't travel as much as we used to, but it doesn't mean you can't volunteer at the school around the corner, so you can kind of get that part of you fed. That's what always feeds me. All of those things.
What about you, Lindsay?
Ditto to everything Billy said. And it really is about the people. And I will say, just last week, we celebrated a Bring Your Child to Work Day event at the American Bankers Association. We brought over 100 kids to our office to teach financial literacy. And it was simultaneously the most exhausting and energizing day I've ever had, being with that many kids. But the energy and enthusiasm that they had to learn about wants versus needs and decision trees and what are all the financial decisions they might make in their life. It really brings it home when you get to volunteer and see a face and a name to the statistics that we all talk about every day. We've talked so much today about the data and how important the data is, but at the same time, the stories of individuals who have been impacted by this work is so motivating and is the reason why we do the work that we do. So I always encourage bankers, get into the classroom, get into the community. There's nothing like showing up and being there in the community and connecting with people and understanding their story, their journey, their challenges. And we've seen that what really works is when you can tailor the financial curriculum, the financial literacy curriculum and coaching to that individual and to that specific group you're talking to. A one-size approach does not work. You have to really be invested in understanding who they are and what their story is and meet them where they are. And that's where we can be really effective is when we can be personalized and tailored and targeted in our approach. And so I think that's really what keeps me going is knowing that there are millions of stories out there, millions of people that we can impact with this work. And we've just got to keep doing it.
Yeah, that's great. I love hearing that. We hear from our volunteers all the time. You know, getting into the classroom the first time can be really nerve-wracking. Like going back and, you know, talking to a room full of middle schoolers or high schoolers. But then there's always that moment where you see somebody have an aha moment and you can see that the light bulb comes on in a different way and they understand a concept and increase their knowledge and their confidence. And so that is the moment that is just so powerful. And we don't know how impactful that could be over their lives. So thank you for sharing that, both of you guys. All right, our last official question before, and we do have some great questions coming up in the chat box, so we'll get to those. So if you have questions that you've been thinking about, now's a great time to put those in the chat, and we'll get to those next. Give us one or two things that people can do to take action to help move financial wellness forward for people. Lindsay, we'll start with you.
Well, I'm mostly going to double down on what I just said, which is get into the classroom, get into the community and do this work. Even if you're working at, like I am, like layers removed from this everyday work, I think having that regular, seeing that regular impact can be really motivating. I think the other thing is just be helping within your sphere of influence, right? You know, we all might not be able to have the impact of reaching millions of people, but how can we help the people within our own circle, within our own family, whether that's, we have a lot of work around supporting older Americans and work around financial caregiving. So that might be helping, you know, an older family member understand their will or, you know, getting ready to support their financial caregiving. It might be helping a niece or a nephew or a child, you know, with those first few financial decisions. You know, it could be a friend. So I think just starting with your own sphere of influence and where you can really lean in and support in a way that's non-judgmental. I know it can get tricky when it comes to family and financial advice. But in a non-judgmental way is to provide that guidance and support and those resources that are available that we all know are all over the internet that you can share with them. And yeah, I think again, just volunteering and supporting people one-on-one makes a real difference.
Great, thank you, Lindsay. And I did put in the chat, if you are interested in getting into the classroom and you're not already a Financial Beginnings volunteer, I put in there the link to be able to sign up and get trained to volunteer with us. Billy, what about you? What are a couple things that you think of that would be great actions to take?
If you're in a state or you have family in a state where this is not required, write to or help them write to their state representatives. Talk about the importance of this work. You know, it may just be one letter, but the more people that do it, it starts to become front of mind. It helps turn the tide, especially um, as many people who support this work. It's helping to build that momentum. So reaching out for that. Also talking to your family, like Lindsay said, about having them ask for this kind of thing as part of their benefits at their job. It might be one voice that starts, but as they talk with their coworkers and more people start to ask, a lot of this really comes from sort of the ground up. And if you're an employee and employees keep asking about a certain thing, it becomes front of mind for leadership, and hopefully it becomes something that they put into place. And then, contact your local school to see what they're doing. I mean, many of you are probably already doing this, so I think I'm sort of preaching to the choir, so to speak, but talk with your family about that as well, especially if they're in different school districts or in different states, to ask, are we doing this in my local school? Because it may not be a state requirement yet, but you can make a difference in that one school. And trying to get the work going in that way, because a lot of the states are very strongly local control. So things that don't really come from the state Department of Education very often, they come from local districts. And if you can start with a couple of key districts that have a lot of influence, that also helps with advocacy in your state.
Yeah, we find too often it's a teacher even who just has a real passion about this for their
Right.
students.
That's right. We've heard
And
that for
so
years.
yeah, there's the ability to, if you have a kid in school, like I have a fourth grader, talking to your kid's teacher about it is a great in. And just
Yeah.
having that kind of warm connection with somebody that you already know and know really cares about the kids can make a really big difference.
Yeah, yeah. And just one other quick thing. If you have a really good personal finance book that you've used or something that's even tied to civics or history, buy it and donate it to the library and say, just the school library. That these are ways that you can keep the topic coming forward. I think little gestures like that, if enough of us start doing it, it really sort of changes it and makes more of a mainstream discussion.
Well, we have some good questions here in the chat. So let's start with this one that it's asking about everything that's happening in the global market and really building a lot of anxiety in people about finances. What kind of steps can people do to work through that? And how can we help people overcome the fear that comes with all the anxiety, not only from what's going on now, but possibly things that have happened in their past that they have to overcome?
That is a loaded question, and it's an important one. I will say that one of the things that we really focus on is building emergency savings, because there's always going to be these fluctuations in the market. There's always going to be these economic challenges, and we're not always going to be prepared and equipped to weather all of them, to weather the uncertainty. But we have found that when people do have an emergency savings, stable emergency savings that they can use when necessary, it can help weather those challenges, whether it's economic recession or the pandemic or whatever it might be. So that's really a key focus for us. And we have some consumer resources on our website at ABA Foundation around how do you create that emergency savings? How can you, save a little bit at a time? And again, making sure that we understand, we're articulating in a way that is not judging people or talking down to them or being patronizing is the word I'm thinking of, patronizing or condescending about their past financial decisions, but really helping them navigate the current moment and sort of support that financial planning so that they're able to get that emergency saving in place. So that's really a big focus for us, I think, now and ongoing.
That's great. Another one here in the chat. What would you say are top finance concepts or principles that you think would make the most impact for people? This is like, top financial empowerment hits here. Either of you want to share what the top few might be for you?
Well, understanding credit, just think about how easy it is to get in debt. It is so easy to get in debt. Understanding credit, understanding the tools within credit, understanding how to use it in a way that's positive, that's always number one for me. And people have been asking me this question for years, and I always talk about helping people understand their paycheck and their benefits. It is that's such a low hanging fruit thing for us to grab a hold of, when people are working to understand what is happening with their benefits and how to use them and what that looks like in terms of taxes and so forth. Those two things, if you can start there, then other pieces like budgeting, investing start to come to play. But I think for me, managing and understanding credit and understanding your paycheck are the on-ramps to those other topics. Now, others may disagree, in terms of the order of that. But for me personally, I have always seen those to be the hooks where people engage quickly.
Yeah, I would just add to that. I think personally for me, what would have been so helpful are those first financial decisions I was making in my early 20s, late teens, early 20s. And that's really the moment where it really gets dicey, and you realize pretty quickly that there's severe repercussions, whether it's getting student loans or understanding credit, paycheck, absolutely, Billy, how much money should I withhold, renting an apartment, buying a car. Those first financial decisions are critical. And so I think if we can help people understand the fundamentals, the beginning of, early adulthood, that will set them up. Obviously, it is ongoing learning, but that will hopefully provide a good foundation for their financial future.
I wish someone had told me when I was a teenager that a credit card is a loan. A credit card is a loan. Gosh, it would have saved
A really bad rate
in college.
Well, and I think,
Horrible.
I grew up, Billy, at a time when there were credit card companies at colleges.
Oh, me too. They give you a shirt.
I mean, I don't know if that happens anymore, but I've heard
I
horror
don't know.
stories about people, and because young people, they didn't understand that.
Yeah. I got $1,000 credit limit with no job at 18. I don't know who made that decision. But I just could have truly benefited from really understanding what that meant. I still might have made bad choices, but I would have known, I would have been more informed. These
Yeah,
questions in the chat are heavy, man. Whew.
I
I
know.
think each one of them
Oh,
is a topic for a whole discussion.
you can tell we have some big thinkers
Yes,
on
you
the call
do.
today. So next I'm going to um go to the one about Billy, you had mentioned that low-income schools are requiring financial education at lower levels than other schools. Um, can you share if there's any strategies or ideas on how to support low-income schools to
Yeah.
teach financial education?
Well, I think there's a lot of things at play here. I think from my own research, from many years of research on teacher professional development, is that when the educators themselves are not confident, they're not going to approach the topic. Even if it's required, they're only going to pull out things where they feel comfortable covering it. And so working to sort of create a community of educators, connecting teachers where this might be a good on-ramp at a school, where they're already teaching something like civics or even history. There's ways to link history in, math, or even in the elementary grades, to connect them to other teachers who have been doing this so that they can have a little network of folks. Um, and because there's a lot of really good free stuff out there, especially if you're not required yet and you can sort of pull out what you wanted to use. Even kindergarten and first grade, Elmo has lessons on for me, for you, for later. And so just opening them up to where resources are that they can, pull that in. I think a lot of teachers just aren't used to having a resource like the Jumpstart Clearinghouse where you can go in and find lessons from preschool all the way through young adulthood on all kinds of topics, different links. Maybe it's one lesson where they can get those free resources or very low cost resources. I would also suggest working with a local financial institution to see if they would agree to sponsor something, the bank or the credit union to sponsor a teacher PD event, or letting them know about the free teacher professional development through groups like NextGen or Jumpstart, so they can begin to build that network and find where good resources are. And it may start with planting that seed where they do one little lesson and then they see how the students resonate, and then that builds incentive for them to continue to do that. But connecting them to the free resources and connecting them to community is really powerful. And then there's other groups out there. Some of them are large financial services firms like Charles Schwab, where they have volunteers that go into classrooms where maybe the teacher doesn't even have to carry the burden in the beginning. You start with having volunteers come in and do certain things, just like some of you do. But I think it's really about building community and access to quality materials, because they just don't know where to start. Because if you sit down to a search engine and you type out financial education curriculum, you're going to see a lot of noise, and teachers get overwhelmed by that. But sending them to the Jumpstart Clearinghouse, I think, is a good first step.
Yeah, I'm like hopefully too send them our way, the financial beginnings.
That's right.
We would love to partner with them. We would love to get volunteers in their classroom and use our curricula that's specifically built to meet people where they're at and without judgment. So well, wonderful. Well, we are at time now. So I just want to give a big thank you to both Dr. Billy Hensley and Lindsay Torrico for joining us today. I'm sorry we were not able to get to everybody's questions in the chat, but just really grateful to have everybody here. Having so many advocates for this work is really, really important. And together we can make a much bigger impact. So thank you. Appreciate everyone's time today.
Yeah. Follow us on LinkedIn.
Yes.
Maybe you'll find something helpful there.
Thank you. Bye, everybody.
That was fun.